was that? I'm sorry. Okay, that was me. Sorry. Hold on. We're good to go. Good afternoon, Committee on Finance. Welcome to order. Today we have a 2 p.m. agenda. We wanted to thank the audience and members for being here. During the hearing, if you have technical problems, you can use the chat function to communicate with our IT staff. It's not meant for substantive discussion because this is really the IT staff trying to figure out if there's any kind of technical problems. As you can see, the closed caption function is running under whatever we're.
Turn your speaker off. Oh, it's Lisa.
And because of that, we ask your assistants to speak slowly and clearly so that the closed caption automatic closed caption function can pick up whatever we're saying. Our apologies that a lot of times the closed caption function doesn't correctly write down exactly what we're saying. So with that, as long as we know that, if you get kicked out of the hearing because of some technical reasons, then you can try to log back on. Okay, so with that, why don't we start with the first bill? First bill is House Bill 1. This is making appropriations for the legislature and our attached agencies. So we will be taking testimony based on the HD1. First up is the Ethics Commission.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. Dan Gluck with the Hawaii State Ethics Commission. We stand on our written testimony in support of the measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is the Ombudsman's Office.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. This is Robin Matsunaga, State Ombudsman, standing on my written testimony in strong support of the bill, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Next up is the Chief Clerk.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Takashita, the Chief Clerk. I stand in support of the bill and will be available for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up is the Auditor's Office.
Good afternoon. I'm Les Kondo. I'm the auditor. I also will stand on my testimony, but I wanted to express my appreciation for the work that went into the proposed HD1. It will reduce our budget by 8%, not the 52.6% that was in the original bill. So it will allow us to continue to do the work that we're supposed to be doing. And I also want to note that it also brings back into the bill the audit revolving fund that was removed from the original bill. That audit revolving fund is extremely important because that is the source of funds that we use to pay the CPA firms that perform the comprehensive annual financial report, which is the state's financial audit, as well as the financial audits for 22 other state departments and programs. Without that fund, we would be unable to pay those contracts and we'd have to end up canceling those contracts. Anyway, I stand ready to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up is LRB.
Good afternoon, Chair Luke and members of the committee. I'm Charlotte Carter Yamauchi, the Director of the Legislative Reference Bureau. We also stand on our comments and would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? If not, let's move on to the next bill. House Bill 54. There is nobody here to testify on this. The purpose of House Bill 54 is put in a provision to drop in funds into the rainy day. So with that, if we can go to the next bill, House Bill 1184 relating to taxation. First up is Tax Foundation. Oh, not present. Thank you. JP Cortez.
Hi, thank you to the committee for allowing me to speak. My name is JP Cortez and I'm with the Sound Money Defense League. I will also stand on my written testimony in support of the measure, and I'm available for any questions from the committee.
Thank you. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? Representative Kobayashi.
Where's Department of Taxation?
There is
Written only?
written only.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Not with us today on Zoom? No, the Department of Taxation.
Department of Taxation is not on Zoom.
Okay, it's not a Zoom approved.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We must have tired them out yesterday. Okay, let's go to the next bill, House Bill 570, relating to sexual abuse of minors. First up, it is Attorney General's Office.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Karen Inagaki, Deputy Attorney General. We've provided comments. Certainly we understand that additional time may be needed for victims of child sexual assault to be ready to even talk about it, let alone file lawsuits. But we did want to point out the concerns we have about the length of time. This bill seeks to reopen the window for 4 more years, in addition to extending the statute of limitations. So the longer the period of time is extended, the more difficult it is to get valid evidence. Over time, witnesses will move away or pass away. The perpetrator also may pass away. Records get destroyed. And we're facing that actually right now with several lawsuits in our office where in one case, we can't even confirm employment. So, it is a concern that we wanted to point out that the longer the period of time is, that the evidentiary problems do increase. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. If you have any questions, I'll be available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sex Abuse Treatment Center.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Cindy Shimomi Saito. I'm the Executive Director of the Sex Abuse Treatment Center. And on behalf of SATC, we stand on our written testimony in support of the measure, but I would like to point out that we included an amendment in our testimony and really just respectfully ask that it be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Child U.S. Advocacy. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and committee members for allowing me to testify in support of House Bill 570. My name is Catherine Robb. I'm the Executive Director of an organization called Child U.S. Advocacy. Our sister organization is Child USA, the national think tank on child protection laws. I'm also a mother, and I'm also a survivor of child sexual abuse. At age 9, I was sexually assaulted by someone I knew and trusted, and that abuse went on for about 5 years. So my voice here is not just as an expert who testifies all over the country, but as an advocate and attorney, but also the voice of that little girl and every other little girl and boy out there. As the Executive Director of Child U.S. Advocacy, we, like I said earlier, work on statute of limitation reform all over the country. And there is clearly a national trend by lawmakers in responding to this epidemic of child sexual abuse. Since 2002, 37 states, the federal government and the District of Columbia have extended their statute of limitations, and 19 states have passed revival legislation. 10 states have eliminated their SOL for child sexual abuse. In 2019 alone, 9 states passed revival and window legislation. So clearly there is this national trend to respond to this epidemic. The trend is clear. And, as we see in other states, New York, North Carolina, Vermont, and many other states, the courts are still functioning. The sky has not fallen. And if I could just respectfully address the Attorney General's concerns that there are safeguards in place. The rules of civil procedure, the rules of evidence are still in place when there may be evidentiary issues. And honestly, plaintiffs still have to prove their case. These are not car crash cases. They're not slip and fall cases. We're talking about the sexual assault and rape of children. So they're very different types of civil wrongs. And I do believe that public policy demands that we have a very different response. We know that there are 3 compelling purposes to statute of limitation reform and why so many states are enacting this type of legislation. First, it identifies previously unknown predators, hidden predators. It also shifts the cost away from the victim and taxpayer to the bad guys, and it also educates the public. We know that in high-profile cases like Jeffrey Epstein, Larry Nassar, Boy Scouts of America, the Catholic Church, that the press and media report these stories. They publish investigations and documentaries on these issues, and that really educates the public. What we know about the epidemic of child sexual abuse is that 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 13 boys will be sexually assaulted before the age of 18. That's 13% of our children. We also know that the monsters, they look like the good guys, but they're the Sandusky's, the Nassars, the Epsteins, the list in the Philadelphia grand jury report. We've seen doctors and family. So we know that this epidemic is hidden by what people understand as stranger danger, which really is such a small percentage. We also now understand the science of delayed disclosure, and that science supports SOL reform. We know that the average age of disclosure is age 52. I didn't speak publicly about my sexual abuse until I was in my mid-40s. And we know that this proposed window in civil SOL extension in Hawaii against perpetrators to the age of 68 will be in line with the science, will be in line with what we know. The other thing that we know better than we did years ago is that through the science of traumatology, social science data, the science of stress, we understand how the young brain responds to stress. We understand that those constant high-level releases of cortisol in the brain of a child, typically during chronic stress or toxic stress, that those high levels really affect and damage the architecture of the brain. For example, it shrinks the hippocampus, which, by the way, is the leading note taker in the brain. So it affects memory and concentration and attention, but it also affects the neurons and neurotransmitters in the brain as well. And even beyond those neurobiological effects, we know that there are significant psychological and medical issues that victims suffer: post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, behavioral issues, sleep and eating disorders, substance abuse, employability issues, suicidal ideations. What we also know is the financial burden that it placed on victims, medical bills, therapy, medication, substance abuse, treatment, that type of thing. But we're also discovering with recent data the financial burden that it has on jurisdictions such as Hawaii, that child abuse burdens all sectors of society. It burdens educational systems, medical systems, social service systems, law enforcement systems, and workforce. And we also know that it burdens the penal systems because there is significant evidence and research that more than 70% of incarcerated people were sexually abused as children. In a study done in 2015, the cost of abuse is
Excuse me.
Sure.
So one of the things I forgot to tell the testifiers is, in as much as you can, if you can summarize,
Sure.
We have your written testimony, and we have a deadline of trying to file all the bills by Friday. So one of the things, in order to help the drafting agency, the sooner we can get through all the hearings,
Understood. My
Master, we
apologies.
can get some of these bills that we want passed out.
I'll just wrap it up with saying that thank you for your leadership. And I commend you for, considering this legislation. Hawaii has been, as you all know, a leader in justice and a leader in protecting kids. And I certainly hope that you can continue with that effort. Thank you for your leadership, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much. Next is Cheryl Hawk.
Hello. I'll be briefer. Mahalo, Chairman Luke and honored committee members. For the last 5 years, I've traveled to Hawaii, my childhood home, from Michigan to testify on advocacy of bills just like this one that have not gone through. I truly appreciate not having to get on a plane and traveling for 14 hours to come and testify, and you allowing me to do this over Zoom. Growing up in Hawaii, I was controlled, threatened all 18 years of my childhood, physically, emotionally, and sexually by my father. I was smothered with a pillow until I passed out so that he could tell me that's what it felt like to die if I spoke out. It took me 50 years to gain the courage to do it. I applaud the attempt of the extension of the statute of limitations, and I've watched bills for 5 years trying to be passed. However, as I read the new edition today, at the very, very bottom, it says to take effect July 1st, 2006. My heart sank. With PTSD, 4 neurological conditions, I can't tell you how the adrenaline and the cortisol runs through my body. And I can't imagine how it feels for the rest of the victims in Hawaii like me. I just want to address the Attorney General again, because I've seen her and heard her so many times. And I've told many legislatures, I remember everything. It's one of the curses of hypervigilance from what I went through. And I was lucky. I got the window and I was awarded a large amount of money. I acknowledge that money plays a large role in all of this. I realize it's in the finance committee because we all know that money speaks. My settlement has enabled me to travel, testify, donate to organizations that support abuse victims, adults and children, and financially support educational podcast series sharing public importance of understanding victims like me, signs of abuse, and some way for people to see what's really going on. And I want you to know that I live in Michigan, so we know what's going on. The fact is, it's in your hands to pass this. It is in your hands to get this done, and not in July 2060, but now. Mahalo for your time.
Thank you. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? If not, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 1284, House Draft 2, relating to Department of Human Services. First up, it is DHS.
Hi, this is Judah Moore Peterson for the Department of Human Services. We stand on our written testimony in support of this bill. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? If not, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 1027, House Draft 1, relating to marine life conservation districts. First up, it is DLNR.
Good afternoon, Chair Luke, Vice Chair Cullen, David Sakota on behalf of DLNR. We stand on our written testimony in support and offering a suggested amendment. We've also provided a proposed House Draft 2, and we're available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Friends of Hanauma Bay.
Good afternoon, Chair Luke. I'm Lisa Bishop with Friends of Hanauma Bay. Until this hearing started, Friends of Hanauma Bay was in support of House Bill 1027, but we no longer can support this bill. We recognize that DLNR needs money to support the management, conservation, educational outreach, and restoration of Hawaii's marine life conservation districts that provide havens for endemic marine species and native reef habitats. So we supported this bill with the amendment in both House Draft 1 and HD 2 that all fees and monies collected from or in connection with the Hanauma Bay MLCD shall only be used for the benefit of the Hanauma Bay. This is in accordance with 2 federal court rulings governing the use of revenues collected at Hanauma Bay. We have recently just found out that these federal court rulings will not be complied with if this bill passes. And so we must oppose House Bill 1027 as written. We still support the use of revenue from the city's Hanauma Bay Fund for coral restoration at Hanauma Bay through a grant program, for example, but not through this MLCD special fund that House Bill 1027 proposes to create. It would violate the 2 federal court rulings, and it would throw Friends of Hanauma Bay and the city in direct legal conflict with the state to do this. So this bill needs to be rewritten in such a way that that conflict doesn't occur and that the court rulings are adhered to. So thank you for the opportunity to testify in opposition of House Bill 1027.
Thank you. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? If not, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 160, House Draft 1, relating to registration of vehicles. First up, it is Hawaii State Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, Chair Luke, members of the committee, John Okudara for HSAC. House Bill 160 and the next bill, House Bill 161, are part of our package, which are meant to address the problem of abandoned and derelict vehicles, which is becoming a very expensive problem for most of the counties. We would recommend that the changes in both bills be adopted if you consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? If not, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 161, House Draft 2, relating to registration of vehicles. Again, Mr. Okudara.
Same testimony. Again, this addresses the problem of abandoned and derelict vehicles. We ask for your support of those measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? If not, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 389, House Draft 1. This is relating to post-secondary education. First up, it is DCCA.
Good afternoon, Chair. Bobby Lemieux with the Hawaii Post-Secondary Education Authorization Program, or HPEAP. I stand in my testimony in support of this bill and will be available if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is University of Phoenix.
Aloha, Annie McCapagal on behalf of University of Phoenix. Although we understand and appreciate the concept of this bill, we are respectfully submitting testimony in opposition to the measure. The University of Phoenix is only one of 4 for-profit post-secondary institutions among the almost 25 registered in the state. The Hawaii Post-Secondary Education Authorization Program was created in 2013 to provide regulatory oversight of those degree granting institutions, including the University of Hawaii. Since then, we at the University of Phoenix willingly and openly comply with these additional state requirements. I commend the drafters of the measure for their passion to protect those seeking higher education goals and better their lives. However, I'm unaware of any current concerns with the for-profit entities registered in the state. If there's any cause for concern, we're open to discussing appropriate methods to alleviate these anxieties and empower our authorization program in the DCCA with tools to more successfully weed out any bad actions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Next up is Institute of Clinical Acupuncture.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, hi. My name is Wai Holo, and I run the school here for many years. I submitted my testimony, and I just want to point out that there are only maybe 3 or 4 schools left that are for profit. And one of the, actually it's 4 schools for profit that are degree granting institution in the whole state of Hawaii. One of them is a foreign school, I think based in Japan. The rest is us, Hawaii Medical College and University of Phoenix. I don't see, putting signs up and saying that, this is only the 3 for-profit school left in the whole state of Hawaii. It's like shooting ourselves in the foot, and tell people, oh, don't have to come to our school. If the state intends to create a non-profit schools in the whole state, I'm fine with that. I can just change my school to non-profit. Then the whole state of Hawaii will just have no for-profit schools at all. But is that the intent of the legislator? And is that the spirit of America to have non-competition? That's just my concern about that. I suggested to the last hearing committee, if they really want to do it, we can put in disclosure in the enrollment agreement to prospective students, enrolled students, and let them know about our financial status. The health of the financial is always being audited by the US DOE, and that is how the stable of the schools. Thank you for opportunity to testify. I can answer other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Chamber of Commerce. Okay, thank you. Next up is Hawaii Medical College.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ashton Kudrow. I'm the president of Hawaii Medical College, and I want to thank you all for allowing me to testify. I do stand by my written testimony. However, I just wanted to share that as my testimony does state, I'm a little disturbed by the bill, mainly because there's assumptions being made in terms of the quality of the institution based on the tax status of the institution. And because an organization is for profit, it doesn't necessarily make them inherently bad. It doesn't make them inherently good. Same thing with not-for-profit schools, private schools, or public schools. However, I am available for any questions that you may have. Thank you much.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers on Zoom. Any questions, members? Representative Kobayashi.
A question for DCCA about accreditation agency. Aren't there several accreditation agencies that are separate or not recognized by the U.S. Department of Education?
No, I mean, if there are any accrediting agencies not recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, we would not be authorizing that school that is accredited by that organization. To be authorized by us, the school has to be accredited by an agency recognized by the U.S. Department of Education.
I see. So, but I mean, so if a school is recognized by a accrediting agency other than U.S. Secretary of Education, they would still have to put this statement into their materials. Is that right?
I believe, yes, the unaccredited degree granting institutions would have to do that. That would be with HRS Chapter 446E, which is enforced by the Office of Consumer Protection.
Okay, thank you. My concern was that I've seen materials where a school will put in prominent locations that they are accredited by this or that organization. And most people, including myself, have no idea whether that accrediting agency is recognized by U.S. Department of Education or not. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Vice Chair.
Quick, can I have Hawaii Medical College, Mr. Ashton? How would, if this bill was to pass, how would it impact your business or Hawaii Medical College?
I'm relatively confident it's going to increase our expenses a bit, simply because we have to review all of our advertising. We'll have to review all of our documentation to kind of ensure that we are in line with that particular law. But outside of just those practical natures, I'm also relatively confident that it would hurt enrollment. One of the things that tends to happen is simply because of this tax status of an organization, people tend to attribute negative, make negative assumptions about the organization simply because it's for profit, which is also what I saw as I was reading the bill. You know, the legislature believes that a for-profit does not support the goals of the student to find employment. And I believe those kinds of connotations would definitely hurt our enrollment and hurt our students and hurt the community.
I just want to simply summarize.
sorry.
If this bill was to pass, what kind of percentage or dollar value would it impact? Would that have to, would it be like a -5%, -10 to a small local business?
For a small local business like ours, I could see this particular bill hurting by at minimum 10%. As I think about how it affects enrollment as well as our just operations.
What would that reflect in what would a 10% hit look like to your operations?
10%, well, we're a relatively small school. A 10% hit would definitely be us letting go a few people, as well as giving up some space. But a 10% hit is pretty challenging for us. The only revenue we have is tuition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, let's move on to the next bill. House Bill 225 relating to bullying. First up, it is Department of Education.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Luke and Vice Chair Cullen. I'm Heidi Armstrong, Department of Education, representing Superintendent Kishimoto. The department stands on its written testimony, and we offer our written concerns to this bill in our testimony. I'm available for any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers. Any questions, members? If not, let's move on to the
Chair.
next. Oh, Representative Sayama.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for the Department of Education, for Mr. Armstrong. In your written testimony, the Board of Education noted that they require some resources in order to fulfill the obligations listed in HB 225 HD2. What kind of resources would be required?
Well, I think compiling the list, we do have an extensive database system that collects all of the information for every instance or incident. But to take that from the database and first of all, we wouldn't want to do it individually by student and track the whole case from beginning of incident, timeline, and outcome of incident and put that into a report. That requires manpower. It would require somebody to do that work. But I don't know what positive outcome comes from that work. How does that change anything? You know, how does that make things better? So I'm not sure of the intent even of doing all of that work. What is the purpose?
Without this bill, is there currently a system in which the public can access ongoing investigations of bullying or perhaps cases that have already been completed?
We report our case numbers. They're reported on our website and we submit an annual report to the legislature. We don't report publicly what's happening in an open case. However, our new Chapter 19 guidelines do require us to have clear, open communication of the case from start to finish with the outcome and follow-up actions to both the complainant and the respondent in the case. So our new HAR Chapter 19 does require, and it is a good measure, the department to do that so that the families of those involved are fully informed of what is going on from beginning to end. And they also have the right to appeal that and to have a hearing on it.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 11, House Draft 1 relating to education, Department of Education.
Good afternoon, Chair Luke, Vice Chair Cullen, and members of the committee. I'm Terry Ushijima, Assistant Superintendent with the Department of Education, testifying on behalf of Superintendent Christina Kishimoto. The Hawaii Department of Education supports HB 11, House Draft 1, and stands on our written testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. That's all the testifier. Any questions? If not, let's move on to the next bill, House Bill 33, relating to Information Technology Steering Committee. First up, it is Department of Education.
Aloha, Chair Luke, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Brooke Connor with the Department of Education. I'm the CIO there, and we'll be standing on our written testimony in support of this measure. Of course, we are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Next up is Office of Enterprise Technology Services.
Good afternoon, Chair Luke, Vice Chair Cullen. My name is Caroline Julian Freitas, the Senior Communications Manager for the Office of Enterprise Technology Services on behalf of CIO Doug Murdoch, and we stand on our testimony in support of the measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers. Any questions, members? If not, let's recess until, let's see, 3:30 for decision making. I still have not received the information I requested from yesterday's hearing. Okay, thank you. 3:30 reconvene. Committee on Finance will reconvene for decision-making on our 2 p.m. agenda. First up is House Bill 1. This is the legislature and the attached agencies budget. The recommendation is to pass the proposed HD1, so pass as a HD1 with technical non-substantive changes. Any discussion? Representative Kobayashi?
I think the record should show that everybody, including the attached agencies, took a standardized 8% cut across the board.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 1, the recommendation of the chair is to pass with amendment. Noting all members present, any members voting reservations, any members voting no, all members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 54 relating to the state budget. Recommendation is to pass as a HD1 with technical non-substantive changes. This is to have a vehicle to deposit money into the rainy day fund. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 54, recommendation of the chair is to pass with amendments, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Any members voting no, all members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 1184, House Draft 1 relating to taxation. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? Representative Tam.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the Americans for Democratic Action's testimony, I will be voting no. I think that this is the wrong time to enact such a legislation.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 1184, House Draft 1, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Any members, I have a no vote from Representative Tam. Any other members voting no? Okay, just keep your hands up, please. Caruso, Martin. Caruso, Sayama. Okay, so I have no votes from Representative Martin, Peruso, Sayama, and Tam. Any other members voting no? Okay, all other members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 570, House Draft 2 relating to sexual abuse of minors. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 570 HD2, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 1284, House Draft 2 relating to Department of Human Services. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 1284 HD2, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 1027, House Draft 1 relating to marine life conservation districts. Recommendation is to pass as a HD2, and this will insert a 5-year sunset and technical non-substantive changes. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 1027 HD1, recommendation of the chair is to pass with amendments, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 160, House Draft 1 relating to registration of vehicles. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? Not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 160 HD1, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Reservations by Representative McDermott. Any other members voting reservations? Any members voting no? All other members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 161, House Draft 2 relating to registration of vehicles. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 161 HD2, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Any reservations by Representative McDermott. Any other members voting reservations? Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 389, House Draft 1 relating to post-secondary education. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 389 HD1, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present, any members voting reservations. Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 225, House Draft 2, relating to bullying. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? Representative Sayama.
Thank you, Chair. While I do support the intent of this measure, I am concerned that we are giving BOE a task which they do not have the appropriate resources to complete, resources which the state does not have. I'm also concerned that this is a redundant reporting measure. As BOE testified, they already have an annual reporting system for bullying cases. And so with that, I will be voting with reservations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? If not, please take the vote. Well, Representative Peruso. Okay. If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 225 HD2, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present. And the reservations by Representative Sayama. Any other members voting reservations? Okay, I have Representative Tam and Peruso. So reservations by and Bronco. Okay. So I have reservations by Bronco, Peruso, Sayama, Tam. Any other members voting reservations? Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 11, House Draft 1, relating to education. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 11 HD1, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present. Any members voting reservations? Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is House Bill 33, House Draft 1, relating to Information Technology Steering Committee. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voting on House Bill 33 HD1, recommendation of the chair is to pass as is, noting all members present. Any members voting reservations? Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Chair, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Now moving on to the decision-making agenda, which is a 215 agenda. First up is House Bill 1015, House Draft 2, relating to disposition of water licenses. We will defer this measure indefinitely. Moving on to the next bill, House Bill 1296. This is relating to state funds dealing with the tobacco settlement. Recommendation is to pass as a HB1. So in this bill, the tobacco settlement. We're leaving intact the rainy day portion, the 15% that goes to rainy day. But we will be repealing the 12.5% that goes to the Hawaii Tobacco Prevention and Control Trust Fund. That will be repealed. There will be a general fund appropriation going to Department of Health to continue the Hawaii Tobacco Prevention and Control Trust Fund. The portion that goes to UH Med School to pay down the debt will have a sunset for the life of the current debt. Initially, when this bill, this legislation was proposed, the intent was to pay off the debt for the new UH Med School. What had happened was, so if you think about it, the duration of the construction should have come and gone, but UH has refinanced this, the debt service. And so I think one of the things that we are tracking down is whether there was savings from the refinance. If that's the case, then the state should realize some of the savings. So the current, after the new refinancing, the current length of the debt runs, we're not very clear, but in 2030 or 2040. So because of that, so it's a recent one, we're not completely sure. So based on that, we will look at the testimony and it will sunset. The allocation to the med school will sunset at the end of the current life of the debt. And in addition to that, remainderment to the general funds and other changes, other cleanup and other changes as may be needed to effectuate what we're trying to do. We have contacted Department of Health to get additional information about tobacco prevention control fund under the jurisdiction of HCF. And we have reached out to them this morning. We have yet to hear back from them, which is somewhat concerning because they know this is an important subject. But just kind of as a historical perspective, when this law was first created, the whole intent was to put large amount into HCF so that it can build up the corpus. So at some point in time, it will have enough to interest generated will be enough to sustain, because I can't imagine $7 million, which it gets on an annual basis, is completely all used on an annual basis for tobacco prevention. It just kind of doesn't make sense. We tried to track down some of the information about how the money was used. The latest information we got was from 10 years ago, and at that point in time, the corpus had $70 million. So we are unclear about the allocation, and we're unclear about how much is in the corpus. And I think after a while, when funds are established and there's very little reporting, I think that's why both HCF and DOH is having a difficult time getting back to us, because they haven't really tracked it, and then they are having a difficult time trying to get that information. So I think that's why we're taking a more aggressive approach. So if you take an aggressive approach, then that will incentivize them to come back with the correct info. Okay, so that's that. Okay, with that, any discussion? Yes, Representative.
So general funded in the same amount that they're currently getting, the 12%?
So general funded in the same amount that is currently allocated to HCF
But
for this year.
that's going
until-
to change every year.
No, it
because
doesn't change every year.
Oh, it doesn't change?
It doesn't change every year because this is the master.
Oh, that's
settlement.
from the court,
Yeah.
MSA, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Gotcha.
But that is just a placeholder, but it really depends on once the legislature takes jurisdiction over the $7 million, we may have to change it depending on what are the different uses and how it's allocated. But one of the things that we should think about is what is the corpus, and if we help to build a corpus in a non-state entity, then what is that responsibility, especially if back in 10 years ago, it had a corpus of $70 million. You can kind of imagine what the corpus is now and what is that responsibility. So this is something that we may need to talk to the auditor's office about having a little bit more insight in what's going on. Okay. Any other discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Yeah. Members voting on House Bill 1296. Recommendation of the chair is to pass with amendments, noting all members present. Any members voting reservations? Any members voting no? All members vote aye, chair recommendation.
Representative Iligan.
Representative Iligan votes
No.
no. Okay. Representative Iligan. Okay. Any other members voting no? So Iligan votes no. Any reservation votes? Okay. All the members vote aye, chair recommendation adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up is House Bill 1297, House Draft Fund. This is a little bit more complicated. So the first part of House Bill 1297, this bill gets rid of the exemption to pay into central services. So what that means is any special fund has to pay 5% into, or 5 or 10%, 5% around there to central services for the administration. There's certain things that we exempt. So a good example is nursing facility and hospital facility and other ones that we think, okay, you know, those things, those are direct pass through, so we're not gonna charge them a fee to use DAGs and DNF services. But in light of what we, after taking a look at it, I do think that there's certain things that we should charge, and those are state agencies that we completely fund. So as an example, HTA is one of them. I don't know why we would exempt them from central services, especially since we are completely supporting their function. So we will be eliminating the exemption. So it's a double negative, eliminating the exemption for HTA and also eliminating the exemption for central, the convention center, because that's completely paid by the state. So it's almost like we're paying them and then, doesn't make sense that, they would be exempt because we're ultimately going to pay them anyway. The other one that we will be eliminating from exempting is what's known as CEFI, which is number 4 under this list, State Educational Facilities Improvement Special Fund, but that has been eliminated already because we eliminated that fund several years ago. So because of that, we will just wipe that off and clean the books. The other thing that we will eliminate from the exemption would be Trauma System Special Fund, because that is also completely paid for by the state. It's not as if it's a pass-through and they don't get any other funds other than state cigarette tax and EMS. And the reason for EMS is funded by special funds and general funds. So it doesn't make sense that they would be exempt. So those are the 5 things are the only ones that will be eliminating from exemption. Everything else will continue to be exempted. So that's one. So the second thing that I wanted to put into this bill is a reporting requirement by all non-general funds. And as you know, as part of finance, every state program puts in a performance measure. So we also wanted to make any special funds also do reporting of performance measures. So this is an avenue where we are now going to hold special funds to justify their spending and expenditures and report back. So we'll be putting a reporting requirement where all special funds have to report to the legislature on their expenditure and uses. So we'll be putting that in. Hold on. Going to the Cancer Center, so very similar to JAPSIM, Cancer Center is that Cancer Center building started construction in early 2000 and their debt was about to run in 2019 or 2020. In 2019, UH refinanced. And now the debt for the Cancer Center will run on 2038. We believe that when it comes to 2037, when some of you are still here and some of us won't, it's very likely that UH will refinance again to continue the use of this fund. But if that similar to JAPSIM funds, if UH will be refinancing, then the state should realize some of the benefit and not for UH to refinance and use the credit or equity built in to do other work. That's just not very transparent. So because of that, we are going to put a hard sunset for the life of the current debt service. The other thing is because this is tobacco funds, this is not settlement money. The tobacco fund has been going down because, people have done a good job and they know that, cigarette use is not good. So, so every program attached to tobacco fund has been dwindling. So the Cancer Center allotment has barely had enough to pay for the construction side, so UH kind of subsidize or do something. But then this bill also allows for this to be used for operation, and they have not used for operation only because there's only enough money for debt service. So to conform to the current standard, we'll be eliminating the portion that the money can be used for operation, because operation really should be the responsibility of UH. So we'll be eliminating that portion. Okay, so trauma will stay intact, community health center will stay intact. EMS will be, EMS will still be, the special fund will be intact, but the allocation out of tobacco will be eliminated because they are heavily subsidized by general funds anyway. So as we transition EMS through discussion with the counties about share responsibility or complete responsibility by the counties, I think part of it is start eliminating some of the funding areas. Let me see if I have everything, sorry. And other cleanup language and some additional changes to effectuate the intent of what I'm trying to do. Okay, any discussion, Representative Martin?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, or just for clarification, you said that the health center special fund will be intact?
Right, right.
So the way they function will not change. It
Right.
will not get switched to the general
Right,
fund?
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Representative Kobayashi.
Defective date?
No defective date. What's that?
Clean date.
For 2021. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah. Okay, okay, any other discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Members voted on House Bill 1297 HD1. Recommendation of the chair is to pass with amendments. Noting all members present. Any members voting reservations? Any members voting no? All members vote aye. Recommendation adopted, Chair.
Thank you, hearing is adjourned.